In this short video, I'm going to show you how to create a two-table database which keeps track of students taking classes. So we're going to keep it real simple. We're just going to create two tables, one describing students and containing their information, and another containing information about the classes or the courses that they're taking. So let's create the very first table. Let's click on Create tab and click on Table, and let's move to Design View, and let's call it Students. Right. So let's think what kind of fields we're going to need to describe a student who is in a college taking courses. Obviously, we'll need the first name, last name. We will need their somehow how we're going to communicate with the student, right? So probably like the email, the address, the phone number. And we definitely need some way of being able to uniquely identify each student in our database. So for this purpose, we can use like social security number, student ID number, and so on. So the very first line, which is automatically populated by Access, is showing an ID with order number. I'm just going to change it to student ID and change the order number to short text, because we may decide that we want to use the first letter of the first name, first letter of the last name, and then some numbers. So I just want to add some ability to be creative here. Okay, so let's double check the data types. So the first name is going to be short text, last name the same thing. The only thing I'm going to change is the phone, and you can change it to numbers, or you can just leave it as a short text in case you're going to add some parentheses and so on. So I'm going to leave it as a short text. Okay, and I'm just going to say that this is my primary key, the student ID, again, the field that is going to uniquely identify this table. Okay, so I'm done with my first table. I'm going to close it and save the changes. And now I'm going to create my second table. Again, let's move to, oops, make sure that you're creating it in the design view. Okay, and I'm going to call it classes. All right, so let's think about what type of fields we need to have in this table to be able to describe any class that our students take. So the very first one is probably going to be the subject area, right? And this is like CIS, English, BBC, and so on. Now we also need to add level, right? So we know whether it's like 101 class, 201 class, and so on. We probably need to add the start date. Times, and probably instructor. Okay. And what am I missing here? And date. And date. Okay. All right. So now I think, though we can definitely leave the data type as short text, I think it would be better if we change the start date and end date to actual date and time. So I'm going to change those data types. The times, it's basically times when the class meets. And the last thing we need to do is, okay, so what is going to be our unique field, unique identifier for this table, which is going to uniquely identify each record in this table. And as we know, we can't really use like CS 101 because there can be like multiple classes under this, but we can use like a section number, because section number in our scenario is going to be unique for each of the classes. So I'm just going to say class section, and I'm going to change it to number, and this is going to be my primary key. Okay, and I'm going to save it. Okay, and so let's look at the tables now. I'm going to go to the database tools, to the relationships, and I'm going to add both tables here. Okay, and so let's see what we have here. So we have students taking some classes. So this table describes a student. So every student has a name, every student has last name, every student has email, address, phone. Probably need to add date of birth here as well to easily identify students, so we know whether it's, for example, if the student is over 18, you don't need any parents' permission for them to take classes and so on. So I'll add that field here. Now the classes table has everything about classes. So every class has a class section. It has some type of subject, level of the class, start date, times, instructor assigned to this class, end date, and so on. So now we need to decide what is the relationship between these tables. So probably the easiest way to describe the relationships between these tables would be one student can take many classes. And if this is the relationship we're going to establish, then we need to add a foreign key which will correspond to a primary key. And again, a foreign key is just a field which is going to be populated in a table which contains foreign data, but it will allow us to establish the join or the relationship between the records in students table and in the classes table. So in this case, because one student is taking many classes, we're going to add student ID, the primary key from students table, to the table classes. And because student ID doesn't truly describe any class, it becomes foreign key to this table. So I'm going to go to classes. Okay, I'm going to open it and go to design view and add student ID. And this is going to be my foreign key in the classes table. Now, what you need to always remember is that the foreign key should have exactly the same data type as the primary key. So just verify what data type you have in the students table, and this is short text. So the student ID in classes table, our foreign key should have short text as a data type as well. Okay, so I said that I want also to add date of birth in the students field, and this is going to be obviously date and time. We can either use extended or date and time just regular, the classes looks good, so I'm just going to close and save the design. Okay, And now I'm ready to establish the join between the students and the classes. So I'm just going to click on the student ID field, and while I'm pressing my mouse key, I'm just dragging it to the student ID in classes, waiting for this little plus showing when I hover over student ID there, and just release it. And that allows me to display the edit relationships dialog window, and I'm just double checking here. So I'm looking at students table and classes table, and in both of these tables I'm selecting student ID field. I'm just going to select enforce referential integrity, click create, and so now I have this relationship established. Please note that this is one-to-many relationship. See down here, the relationship is one-to-many because what we're trying to create here, a relationship which describes one student taking many classes. So now when I, let's close this, make sure we save it. And so now when I go to students table, and let's say I start entering some information, Mary Black, like Mary at gmail.com, and so on. So now I have ability to assign the classes to the student through using the students table. So if you click on this little plus here, you can actually get access to the classes table. So, and in here I can probably add like, okay, so section like 3596, subject, let's say English, level 101, start date, let's say it's going to be next week. In here I can say like it's going to be on Tuesdays from 11 to, let's say, 12:30 p.m. Okay, then you'll add the name of instructor and date. Let's say it's going to be like May 28th, and so on. Now what's interesting, so if I close this and open the classes table, I actually see this information that I inputted while being in students table, because these tables are linked. Okay, right. And this, just one other thing, I think I forgot to change the, okay, so I have extended data type, yeah, and I wanted to change it to just regular date and time over here. All right, so this is basically what I wanted to show you today. Again, when you go to database tools, click on relationships, you actually see the skeleton of your database, the structure of it. And it shows us that we have two tables that are joined with one-to-many relationships through student ID, the primary key in students table, and student ID is a foreign key in the classes table.